Good morning and welcome to the Daily Accelerated Growth Call. This is your call for Wednesday, October 21st, 2015. Let's start off with a moment of calm. Always feels so good to just get centered, just stop. I mean, any time in the day you can pause like that for even just, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. If you can spare it, do the 10 minutes. It's just amazing what it does for you. So today I wanted to talk about what's the purpose of Wall Street. This is really inspired by a tweet that I saw Mark Cuban put out there. I guess it was a few days ago, October 17th. He says, what's the purpose of the stock market? Right, so I guess I just remembered a little differently, and I took it on as, what is the purpose of Wall Street? Right, same idea though. What's the purpose? What's the point? And I did some research. I like to do research before I produce content. I like to know that, the stuff I'm putting out there is based on, knowledge. It's informed rather than just conjecture, right? Conjecture is, information that's based on really nothing. I just make it up as I go. Whereas, I like informed content to me is important. It's important to me to know that that's what I'm putting out there, is what I'm trying to say. So I did some research, and specifically I was curious to know where Mark Cuban might be coming from on this. So I did a little Twitter search, and I came up with a bunch of articles, some written by Mark in his own blog and others in other publications based on Mark or things that Mark said or interviews with Mark or whatever they were. And, because I was thinking about this and thinking, that could be answered a lot of different ways. And it depends on who you're asking. If you ask the startup company who's trying to go public, well, then the purpose is to raise capital for business. And that's ultimately, when I did my research, what it seems that Mark has said, at least based on what I've read, was the original purpose of Wall Street. But I think Mark, what he's trying to say here is that Wall Street has sort of lost its purpose. For my own part, I have kind of this renewed interest, I guess you could say, in Wall Street and the stock market. Some of you who know my background know that I was a stockbroker in my previous life. When I was 21 years old, I got my Series 7 license, and I was actually working at, I worked at a few different places. And I think part of where this renewal of my interest comes from is that I recently watched the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, and it was so familiar to me because I didn't work at Stratton Oakmont, but I remember the Stratton Oakmont firm being very popular, and I worked at other firms who were essentially doing the same thing. And it was the same nonsense that all these firms were doing. Lucky for me, I was only in training at those stages, and by the time I got my Series 7 license, I wound up getting a job with Prudential Securities, which was right on Water Street, right around the corner from Wall Street. I would get off at the Wall Street subway station and walk down to the end of Wall Street and go practically across the street from where Wall Street ended into the Water Street building where Prudential Securities was. And I worked there for a while I was licensed, opening up accounts for a VP. And I had a tremendous experience. I'm so glad whenever I look back that I had that experience. It taught me so much about so many things. So what's the purpose of Wall Street? I have to agree with Mark. The original purpose is and should be to help businesses raise capital so they can grow, right? You have venture capital firms who exist on Wall Street for the sole purpose of finding companies to take public. They want to underwrite these IPOs or initial public offerings and take companies public. And that's what companies like Stratton Oakmont were trying to do. Where you get into trouble, though, is, of course, where people abuse these things, right? And I think that's the message that I'm sort of getting from Mark Cuban when I'm reading the stuff that he's written and the things that he's been quoted as having said in interviews and whatnot, is that Wall Street has sort of lost its way. If you remember a few years back, we had the whole, there was a whole campaign of people who were basically, sitting outside and camping outdoors. I can't remember the term they were using. But it was basically a big protest against Wall Street and big corporations. So what's the purpose? Here's the purpose that I'm going to lay out there from my perspective today. We talk about the business of the new world, and we talk about how to run a small business in today's world. And I think we can learn a lot from paying attention to Wall Street and what's going on Wall Street. And to that end, what should we invest? I think yes, absolutely. In fact, everything I read, if you're like me, then I like to read literature on, like sort of how to be a millionaire kind of stuff, right? And not overnight quick get rich quick schemes, but how to truly work and grow and accumulate wealth the right way. And everything I read says, among other things, there's a few constant threads, consistent across everything I read along these lines, no matter who it's written by. They all say the same thing. And obviously, if I'm reading this kind of stuff, it should be written, I hope, by somebody who has actually accomplished the feat of becoming a millionaire. And I can say in every case, in terms of what I read, it's true. So they all say, among other things, what they all say is that you should invest money. In other words, don't just leave your money in the bank. Let the money go to work for you. So it took me a number of years to get to the point where I felt like I could afford to put money in the market or risk it. So you start off conservative and safe. Maybe you put your money in a money market. And then eventually what I did was I said, okay, it's time to buy stocks. And based on my experience, my short brush with working on actually Wall Street, and that experience plus a book that I read, which was written by Peter Lynch, who's famous for the Magellan Fund. He's also famous for having taken Dunkin' Donuts public, and The Limited, and a number of other companies. And in his book, he talks about how the way he would pick companies was based on what was working. And that sounds like pretty obvious, but he meant something pretty specific by that. And he went further to say you invest in things that you know. So you look around your household. Whose products are you using? Whose products are you buying? Those are the companies you should be owning stock in, because if you believe in their products, then you believe in their company, right? So the first company that I've bought stock in, and so far the only one, is Intuit. Why? Because Intuit is a company whose products I've made my living with for years. And I know this company. And I also had the experience of working with a Wall Street analyst for a brief period of time who loved Intuit stock. In fact, he's the one who encouraged me to buy it. So when the time came, I said, that's who I'm going to buy stock in. And it's done very well. It's a solid company. It's got a lot of cash on the balance sheet. The fundamentals are there. This is not a company who's going to go anywhere anytime soon. So I feel very safe putting my money in a stock like Intuit. So that's what I've done. And frankly, if zero traded on a U.S. market, I'd probably own stock in them too, because I also believe in their company. From a stock market standpoint, Intuit is a very well-established company, though, and one that I definitely feel strongly. If you're an accountant or a bookkeeper who works in the field where you're using Intuit products like QuickBooks or Intuit Tax Online or TurboTax or anything along those lines, then you should absolutely own stock in a company like Intuit. First of all, think of it like this. The capital gains that you can realize have a way of offsetting the costs of, for example, your ProAdvisor subscription, things along those lines. And I started buying Intuit stock at 66. As of the last time I checked, it was over $95. So clearly it was a good investment. Now, will it go down? You bet it will. It's going to go up and down. All stocks do. You can't get into that kind of micromanaging panic. Oh my God, it's gone down. What am I going to do? I learned that early on as a stockbroker. You buy something, you hold it, and you build a position in it, which is why I actually just bought more stock into it, because I want to build positions. And then at a certain point, when I feel satisfied that I own enough shares of Intuit, then I'll buy something else. And when it comes to time to buy something else, again, I'm going to look around. Whose products am I using? I certainly use a lot of Microsoft products. That would be a good stock to own. I live near Disney. Disney is in Anaheim, California, and that's a company I'm pretty sure isn't going anywhere. Now, I'm talking about what you call big board sort of blue chip stocks. These are very well established companies, and so they are, by design very safe, which means you're not going to make a fortune overnight. But that's not the point. You don't want to make a fortune overnight. You want to build and build and build. Just like you build a retirement plan, you want to build these positions and build it over time and make the money slowly, because the money will still be there in 5 or 10 years. You don't have to worry about that. As opposed to investing in some risky IPO, some high-tech company that, there's a lot of hype about, but you have no idea where they're going to go, if they're going to go anywhere. And the likelihood is, just based on the risk-reward ratio, is that you'll lose all your money on a deal like that. If you do make money, it's basically no different than going to Las Vegas and rolling the dice. So I don't believe in investing that way. I believe investing based on the fundamentals. I believe in investing based on what I learned from Peter Lynch, which is look at a company with solid fundamentals, look at a company whose products you know and use, look at a company that you believe in because you feel that company is working. When he took the limited public, it was because his wife came home and told him about this amazing retail store that she had really enjoyed shopping in, and so he went to check it out. And he saw the lines out the door and people shopping. He saw that they were busy, and then he had certain criteria that he would go by. He would visit these companies' corporate offices, and it's very interesting to read how he evaluated companies. The guy's background was that he was an artist. He wasn't a business major. He was like an art major or English major or something like that. He had no actual formal business background, and I think in a way that probably lent itself to him being a much better analyst than most analysts can ever be, because most analysts probably get too hung up on the numbers specifically rather than looking in a big picture of, is this working? Does this company's business model work? Is this a company that can grow and go places? That's what you want to think about. And then, as you learn to evaluate companies from this perspective, now you can turn around and translate that into your own company. Is your own company working? Are people coming in your door? If not, why not? What can you do to make that happen? Is your company one that you would invest in if you were analyzing it from a potential investor standpoint? That's how I want to start teaching people to look at their businesses. That's how I look at my business. I look at my own balance sheet and say, would I invest in this company? Would the sharks from Shark Tank want to invest in my company? This is how I'm constantly thinking every day. This is how I want to train you to think, because I believe that if you can learn, and if I can learn to think more and more along these lines, then we will have no trouble being successful at growing our companies. If we are even half as successful as the kind of companies that the sharks would invest in, we'll do very well. As always, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you on the call.